enjoying the evening so far? On behalf of the 60th Anniversary Committee, I want to welcome you to this celebration in your honor. The committee decided that you would rather be eating, dancing, and drinking rather than listening to long speeches. So we are keeping our programs and presentations to a minimum. With that in mind, we would like you to pay attention, give us your undivided attention for the next few minutes. And first, I would like to welcome you, and the first person to welcome you and bring greetings from the Board of Directors will be one of our past presidents and an excellent pinch hitter, Barry Abrams.
Thank you, Beth. I have something written. It's great seeing everybody again tonight. Last night when they called me up, I wasn't here, but I'm here tonight. I'm very honored to represent our Temple President, Steve Merlin, who will be here with us tonight, but couldn't make it right now. 10 years ago, I had the privilege of welcoming our members and guests at the Temple's 50th Gala. And I have it tonight at our 60th anniversary celebration. In 10 years, we've had many new members, hundreds of children, educated in our religious school, shared the joy in their bar mitzvahs, and also mourned our loved ones, as we do tomorrow, for our past president, Irving Franklin. There's a local Honda dealer who just built a new dealership here in Brockton that had a slogan that I always seem to like. It said, Bernhardi for life. Once you buy a car from them, you are connected with them for life. You could say that about our temple. I think it should be Temple Beth Emunah for life. Some of us have left the temple, moved away, but Temple Beth Emunah is a part of your life and always will be. We have a wonderful and caring temple community that with our support will continue to grow from generation to generation. Central part of our temple is our rabbinic leadership. So I'd like to acknowledge two rabbis with us here tonight. Rabbi Burke, who led our Havdalah service. I don't know if he's here right now. And of course, our Rabbi Emeritus, who led our temple for 36 years, Rabbi Werb, and continues to do a yeoman job all the time. Nobody can replace them. For those of you who couldn't join us last night, Steve read a letter from our former Rabbi, Joshua Cohen, who sent a letter, and I'm just going to read a little part of it. I'm sorry I cannot be here with you tonight at Temple Beth Emunah. I'm going to paraphrase some of this, to celebrate its 60th anniversary. The 2 years that our family spent in Brockton, while short in tenure, helped shape my rabbinic life here and the lives of our family. Temple Beth Emunah is a unique synagogue combining the essential elements of our Jewish teachings. We are taught that the world stands upon three pillars: study, prayer, and the acts of kindness towards others. Though the many different arms of the membership and the community, Temple Beth Emunah accomplishes each of these acts. He goes on to say that he enjoyed all the moments spending time with the Sisterhood, Brotherhood, Bingo, and Keruv. The kids in the Hebrew school were amazing and talented and gifted children with great abilities. He misses the community-wide events that we're famous for here at the temple, with the Brockton Interfaith Committee and the Martin Luther King Luncheon and the Second Seder. And most importantly, he misses the friendships that he created over the years. He also would like to recognize Rabbi Werb for his leadership, not only with the synagogue all those years, but for his mentoring to me as he began his retirement. And what would the shul be without Fran? You are adored. So on behalf of Sarah, Sidney, and Sheehan, he's allowed to be part of our history, and may the synagogue live from Lador Vador, from one generation to the next, in friendship, Rabbi Joshua Become. We also have a recognition from the United States Congress, from the House of Representatives, certificate of special congressional recognition presented to Temple Beth Emunah in recognition of 60 years of service to the Brockton community from our Representative Stephen Lynch. 60th Committee has worked very hard so we can rejoice with great food and music, reconnect with old and new friends, and rekindle our love and memories of Temple Beth Emunah. So on behalf of our President Steve Merlin, the Executive Committee, and the entire Board of Directors, I want to officially welcome all of our members and guests to our 60th anniversary celebration. Enjoy and have a good time.
And of course, we couldn't let this occasion go by without some words from our esteemed Rabbi Emeritus H. David Werb.
I'm the first of and the last of the long-winded speakers. I want to thank you all for getting me out of the mothballs to speak this evening. And I can imagine where you're going to get me from for our 75th anniversary. Probably Newbridge on the Charles or worse. Which reminds me of a story that I just came across of an 80-year-old couple who were having problems remembering things. So they decided to go to their doctor to get checked out to make sure that nothing was wrong with them. When they arrived at the doctor's, they explained about the problems they were having with their memories, and the doctor checked them out. He found nothing wrong, and he gave them some advice. He said, you should write everything down. And that way, you'll remember them better. So later that night, they were watching TV. The man got up from his chair and asked his wife, where are you going? She asked him, rather, where are you going? And he replied, to the kitchen. And she said, will you get me a bowl of ice cream? And he replied, sure. She then asked him, don't you think you should write it down like the doctor said so you'll remember it? He said, nah, I can remember that. He then said, well, I would also like some strawberries on top. Can you remember that? You better write it down so you won't forget. He said, believe me, I can remember that. A bowl of ice cream with strawberries. She replied, okay, well, I'd also like a little whipped cream on top. And she said, you better really write that down. He said, don't worry, I'm going to remember all of this. And I don't need to write it down. He went down to the kitchen, and he came back in a little while, and he handed her the cup of coffee and scrambled eggs. She stared at the plate, and she said angrily, I told you to write it down. You forgot my toast. An anniversary is a time of remembering. We go back 60 years. It's a little hard to remember all those 60 years. Not all of us were here for 60 years. Some of you have been, and some of you were here right at the beginning. The reading of the Torah that we did today was entitled Vayera. Vayera means to see, and throughout the Sidra, this word appeared over and over again. To see, to have vision. The founders of our temple certainly had vision when they founded and established a conservative synagogue here in Brockton 60 years ago. And this was the time of the year that they got together to think about that. We have a list of 19 families that I'd like to remind you of who were among the original founders. It was Mr. and Mrs. Alfred Brenner, Mr. and Mrs. Milton Cohen, Mr. and Mrs. Leon Freeman, Mr. and Mrs. Dan Heidel, Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Katz, and Mr. and Mrs. I. George Kovic, Mr. and Mrs. Manuel Kuhman, Mr. and Mrs. Jacob N. Lippman, Attorney and Mrs. Lewis H. Miller, Attorney and Mrs. Nathan Richmond, Attorney and Mrs. Harry Shapira, Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Scheinman, Dr. and Mrs. Frank Snyder, Mr. and Mrs. Albert Solomon, Mr. and Mrs. Moses Strock, Mr. and Mrs. William Teplow, Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Werman, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Williams, and Mr. and Mrs. Bernard Zielinski. And if you notice out in the hallway, there is another big plaque with names that are added to this that were among the people who helped to donate for the original building, the original temple. But these 19 families are the legendary founders of the temple. And I had occasion to speak to Marty Kovic and Susie Kovic a couple of weeks ago, and I was told that before these 19 families, there were 3 major families that got together. George and Della Kovic and their parents, of course, and Mr. and Mrs. Milton Cohen. Milton Cohen was Bella's brother, and Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Werman. They were really the triumvirate, the first 3 people who sat around the table and thought about creating Temple Beth Emunah. And it's from them that we have our temple today. It is very interesting that, and very sad irony, that the very first Torah was given to our synagogue by the Saffler family. And the irony is that you saw the Brockton Enterprise last week. On the back page you saw a picture of Saflers of Whitman being demolished by the wrecking ball, which is very sad for all of us. We remember what the Saflers did down through the generations here in our congregation. We also remember that it was Max Kaufman who made it possible for us to erect this building, this beautiful structure, and he is kind of the godfather of our temple in more modern times. And then, of course, Irving Franklin was mentioned. As we all know, Irving died. Also, ironically, just the other day, the funeral is tomorrow, and Irving was such a very important part of our congregation. It was actually because of Irving that I'm even standing here before you, because in 1971, Irving sent me a letter inviting me to come to try out. You know, obviously I had sent a resume, but I was the last rabbi to try out here, and of course the rest is history. And Irving donated the sanctuary in memory of his parents, Abraham and Jenny Franklin. He donated the bima in memory of his first wife, Claire, and he donated the beautiful ark that we now have, mahogany ark. At the time when we had our capital campaign, it was donated by Irving and his second wife, Barbara. And so we have a lot to be thankful for to Irving and to his family. And Irving, of course, was president from 1973 to 1977, and a member of the steering committee for building this building. And I also want to remind you of the rabbis who served our congregation. There was the first rabbi, Richard Rubenstein, and he served only 1 year, but he went on to great things. He became a great theologian and philosopher. He wrote a book that made him very famous called After Auschwitz, where he spoke about belief in God after the Holocaust, and he is well known throughout the world for his writings. And he went into academics after he was here at Beth Emunah, and I don't blame him for that. And he actually wrote a book. If any of you read it, you know it's more than a book, it's an expose of the year that he was here at Temple Beth Emunah, and he names names. It's kind of an interesting book. And then we had Rabbi Jerome Weistrop, Rabbi Alvin Lieberman, Rabbi Isaac Moseson, myself, Rabbi Joshua Cohen, and now Rabbi R.A. Burke. And to support us in our leadership roles, we had the cantors. There was Cantor Jerry Gluck, we all know and remember fondly. Jerry was actually here twice. He left and went to Geneva for about a year, and then came back. During that interim period, I think there was a Cantor Fuchs, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't know him, obviously, but the name sounds familiar to me. And then, of course, Jerry came back, and then we had Cantor Alan Kritz. Some of you remember some of the politicians who have come to our temple, Senator Ted Kennedy, Representative Barney Frank, and Cynthia Cream from the Supreme Judicial Court. And the Burton Share Memorial Lecture brought some very famous people to our temple, first being Abba Eban, and then Jerry Williams, Cal Thomas, Lee Ullman, Bruce Filer, Wolf Blitzer, Stephen Dubner, Mitch Album, Chaim Potok, Julius Lester, Marvin Tokayer, just to name a few. And I'm sure that I left some out. We can also thank the educational directors of our temple. In the early years, the rabbis served as the principals and educational directors, I'm told. When I came here, I agreed to be the principal, and turned out to be quite difficult to run the congregation at that time, and to also be the principal. And so Rhoda Factor, who was the chairman of the Board of Education, agreed to take on becoming the administrative assistant, and after a while, after a few years, she became our educational director. And then after her, there was Jennifer Sable, and then now we have Fran Lipner. And of course, all of the religious school teachers who work so hard to educate our children, and the helpers for our educational directors, who are usually members of the congregation, who serve with the educational directors and did a lot of hard work, and still are doing it down through the years. And Jacob M. Lippman Religious School produced a lot of wonderful students, your children, many of you, and some of you sitting here, which makes me so proud to realize that there are people who are in leadership roles in our congregation and members that I bar and bat mitzvah, that I married, and I see kids that I've named who have gone up through the ranks. Just a wonderful feeling to see all of this evolve during my lifetime and during my tenure here at Temple Beth Emunah. And we also want to remember the secretaries. I'm told that Rhoda Chaskis had served as a secretary in the old days, and then when I came, Toby Solomon was here, and Sylvia Maskell. They shared the office and Sylvia was the religious school secretary, but she also helped Toby in the office, and Gert Schachter followed them, and Beverly Strump and Andrea Starr followed her, and Mark Steinberg and Mark Slotnick helped out, and now we have Mimi Shapiro. I think that I have all of them, if anyone remembers anyone else. Was that?
Kathy.
We had a Kathy also? Okay. Kathy who?
Green.
Kathy Green. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll have to write that down, apropos of my joke. And then, of course, in modern times, we decided that we needed administrators of the temple as well. And so our first administrator was Zelda Parnas, and then we had Beverly, who served quite a few years, and now we have Beth Kirsch, who's working very hard in that capacity, and we thank her for everything that she's been doing. We also want to note our youth directors. The first one was Alan Brava and Honey Kosick, and Leslie Cohen, Helen Weiner, Patty Shute, Russ Porges, Danny Porges, Marcy Siegel and Miriam Burke, and Rachel Skirper. I don't know if I left anyone out. Did I leave anyone out, honey?
I didn't write it down.
You're in my category. And all of the people who worked with them, and the various people who helped to make our youth the wonderful examples that they are for all of us. You know, in a few moments, Beverly is going to highlight the past presidents, but before she does that, I also want to acknowledge, I see Salty is standing in the back here. I want to acknowledge all of the custodians that I can remember who worked for the temple. Before I came here, there was the legendary Tony, and then the legendary Bert, and Leo, and Archie, and Jack, and John, Dick, Molly, Salty, Kevin. I want to thank all of you as well for your hard work, who have helped to keep our temple looking as sterling and beautiful as it is. And as I was going to say, in a few moments Beverly is going to speak about the past presidents of our congregation. But the very first president, as we all know, is Jacob N. Lippman, Jack Lippman. And you can see in that beautiful video that was produced for the 50th anniversary, now on the 60th anniversary, we can appreciate it because none of us have grown older in those videos, but it's a wonderful reminiscence. We saw Jack Lippman and so many of our friends, some of whom sadly are gone, but many of us are figured prominently in that video. It's a wonderful reminiscence. But Jack Lippman, every time he would get up, he would always speak about the volunteers. That was so important to him, and rightly so, because the volunteers of our congregation is what has made our congregation what it is today, and allowed us to grow and prosper and continue on for these 60 years. And the members and leaders of the Brotherhood, of the Sisterhood, the Executive Board, the Boards of Directors, the Board of Directors, the USY, all the different arms of the temple, the organizations. You are the volunteers, all of you sitting here. Without you, we wouldn't have a temple. So we thank you all. The prophets tell us, without vision, the people perish. We need your continued vision for Temple Beth Emunah. We need your continued support. We need your continued love for the temple so that we continue to grow and exist and go on to celebrate many more after happy anniversaries into the future.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And now for my conclusion, I will jump off the stage.
Thank you for that brief history. And now back to our 70th anniversary party. It is now my pleasure to introduce one of the co-chairs of this event, the indomitable Reba Castellani.
Just to start, Rabbi Ward was talking about irony, and this afternoon, Emily happened to mention to me that today was Danny's 17th bar mitzvah anniversary, and it was today, actually November 12th. So thank you for coming to a party that I didn't have to pay for. 17 years ago was a different story, and Alan wrote the checks. So tonight again, I want to welcome all of you, as everyone else has. And my task tonight, of course, is to give quite a few thank yous for how we got this evening together. So first, of course, I'd like to thank my committee for all the work that they did tonight, You will never know the countless hours that were spent by each of them. I'm indebted to all of them for all of their hard work. I thank them, and I cannot thank them enough. The sacrifice of time they made was just immeasurable. There was computer work, there was printing work, there was shopping, there was cooking, and there was cooking. And then, when we had nothing to do, there was cooking. To my kitchen boss, Stacy Jacobs. Stacy planned the menu, she brought it to life, she told us what to do. We all listened to Stacy. When I'm in the kitchen and somebody says, Reba, what should I do? My answer is, ask Stacy. I'd also like to thank Liz Kramer. Liz Kramer is the inventor of the logo that you saw in all of the materials for tonight. I can't get over her skill and how beautiful all of that came and brought everything to life. Harriet had an idea. She gave us a catchphrase, and Liz took that and just brought everything to life. To Fran and her staff for the service last night, the kids were wonderful. Fran helped us in many, many ways to make tonight's evening possible, and she never says no to anything we ask of her, and I thank her. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Burke for leading us in services last night and for Havdalah tonight as well. To Carmela, who did the centerpieces and did all of the accent work all around the building tonight, thank you so very, very much. We needed something done at the last minute today, and you never would have known that Carmela didn't have it on the list and had it all ready to go. I'm not going to tell you what it was because you wouldn't believe it. To Barry.